The French Revolution of 1789 was a thunderclap that shook Europe's monarchies. The revolutionary cry for liberté, égalité, fraternité, liberty, equality, and brotherhood, proved that established orders could be overthrown and societies rebuilt from the ground up. The shockwaves spread far beyond France. Across Europe and even in Asia, thinkers and common people alike were forced to confront fundamental questions. Who should control political power? Who truly deserves rights, and what should those rights be? Not everyone agreed on the path forward. Liberals wanted elected governments and religious freedom, but sought to restrict voting rights to property-owning men, believing this was essential for stability. Radicals demanded a more profound change, advocating for rule by the majority, and even supporting women's voting rights, while opposing the privileges of big landlords. Conservatives, horrified by the revolution, resisted change, but after 1789, even they accepted that society had to adapt, slowly, with respect for tradition. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution transformed life on an unprecedented scale. New factories drew millions into rapidly growing cities. Railways spread, but this progress came at a great cost. The new working class faced grueling hours, low pay, constant unemployment, and lived in crowded, unsanitary housing. While liberals and radicals pushed for reforms, for many workers, these measures felt insufficient. They began to desire a deeper, more fundamental change to the system that created their misery. By the mid-1800s, a new vision spread in response: socialism. Socialists argued that private property was the root cause of inequality and that society should control resources for the benefit of all. Early thinkers like Robert Owen built experimental cooperative communities to prove a more humane system was possible. Louis Blanc wanted governments to support them, and Karl Marx went further, developing a powerful theory of class struggle. He called for workers to overthrow capitalism and build a communist society where property was shared. By the late 19th century, these socialist ideas had inspired a powerful international movement. Socialist parties and workers' associations or trade unions rose across Europe. They organized to demand better wages, safer conditions, and the right to vote. United by the symbol of the red flag, their dream was clear: a world based on cooperation, equality, and justice. The questions of 1789 had now merged with the struggles of the industrial age. The age of social change had truly begun. In 1914, the Russian Empire was a colossal entity stretching from Poland to the Pacific. At its head was Tsar Nicholas II, who ruled as an autocrat with absolute unchecked power, believing he was appointed by God. But beneath the glittering facade of the Romanov dynasty, a vast and diverse society was growing increasingly restless, questioning the very foundations of this ancient regime. Russia was overwhelmingly a land of peasants. Over 80% lived by farming, a stark contrast to industrialized Western Europe. Though serfdom was abolished, they remained burdened by debt and land shortages. In the cities, industry grew fast, but workers toiled for long hours in grim conditions. Women formed nearly a third of the labor force, yet earned far less than men, facing a double burden of factory and domestic work. Strikes and protests became common. Peasants deeply resented the tiny elite, the nobility, the crown, and the church, who owned most of the fertile land. They dreamed of a black repartition, a total redistribution of these vast estates. This wasn't just an economic desire, it was a profound demand for social justice. In 1902 and again in 1905, anger boiled over into revolts, with peasants seizing land and even murdering landlords. All political parties were illegal, suppressed by the Tsar's secret police. Still, socialist groups spread their ideas underground. The socialist revolutionaries championed land for peasants, while Marxist social democrats, led by figures like Lenin, believed factory workers should lead the movement. This party soon split into two factions: Lenin's radical Bolsheviks, who wanted a small party of professional revolutionaries, and the more moderate Mensheviks. The breaking point came in 1905, following Russia's humiliating defeat in the Russo-Japanese War. Workers demanding better wages marched peacefully to the Winter Palace. Troops opened fire. The tragedy, known as Bloody Sunday, shattered the myth of a benevolent Tsar and sparked strikes across Russia. Under pressure, the Tsar created the Duma, an elected assembly, but he soon dissolved it, unwilling to truly share power. The First World War brought the final disaster. Initial patriotism soured as Russian armies suffered millions of losses. At home, industries collapsed and the transport system broke down, causing severe food shortages and riots in cities. The Tsar's poor leadership and the scandalous influence of advisors like Rasputin over the Tsarina destroyed his credibility. By 1917, faith in the monarchy was gone. Out of hunger, anger, and the devastation of war, all the combustible elements were in place. The stage was set for the Russian Revolution of 1917, an event that would not only cause the fall of the Tsar, but would also herald the rise of the world's first socialist state, changing the course of the 20th century. By early 1917, life in Petrograd was unbearable. Food was scarce, factories were cold, and the gulf between rich and poor grew wider every day. Anger was ready to explode. On the 23rd of February, women workers went on strike for bread and better wages. Soon, 50 factories joined. Demonstrators filled the streets, clashing with police. By the 27th, soldiers refused to fire on them, and instead mutinied. Workers and soldiers united to form the Petrograd Soviet. Faced with revolt, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated on the 2nd of March 1917. After centuries of monarchy, Russia was now under a provisional government, while Soviets of workers and soldiers grew in power. In April, Lenin returned from exile. His April theses demanded end the war, give land to peasants, and transfer power to the Soviets. Through the summer, strikes spread, peasants seized land, and soldiers' committees challenged authority. The provisional government grew weaker, while Bolshevik influence rose. On the 24th of October, the Bolsheviks made their move. Trotsky's Military Revolutionary Committee seized telegraph offices, banks, and government buildings. The cruiser Aurora fired on the Winter Palace and ministers surrendered. By nightfall, Petrograd was in Bolshevik hands. Across Russia, uprisings followed. The Bolsheviks had overthrown the provisional government and taken power in the name of workers and peasants. The Russian Revolution of 1917 had changed the course of world history. After October 1917, Russia was transformed. Guided by Marxist ideology, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, rejected private property. Banks and industries were nationalized, and the decree on land declared all land social property. This legitimized peasants who were already seizing the estates of the nobility across the countryside. In cities, the social order was inverted. Grand houses were partitioned into communal apartments for multiple families. Old aristocratic titles disappeared, erasing centuries of hierarchy. The army adopted a new uniform, including the distinctive Budyonovka helmet, symbolizing a new socialist identity and a break from the Tsarist past. The Bolsheviks renamed themselves the Communist Party. When the Constituent Assembly, where they lacked a majority, rejected their policies, Lenin forcibly dissolved it, ending multi-party democracy. Russia became a one-party state, with trade unions under control, and a new secret police, the Cheka, was established to silence critics through a campaign of terror. From 1918 to 1920, Russia plunged into civil war. The Bolshevik Reds fought the Whites, a coalition of monarchists and liberals, backed by foreign powers who feared communism's spread. Looting, famine, and violence were rampant. By 1920, the Reds' unified command gained them victory, and in 1922, the USSR was born. The Bolsheviks introduced centralized planning through ambitious 5-year plans. These boosted heavy industry, creating new factory cities. Alongside this, education expanded to fight illiteracy, state-run creches supported women workers, and public healthcare became accessible, though living conditions for the industrial workforce remained desperately harsh. By the late 1920s, food shortages led Joseph Stalin to enforce brutal collectivization. Private farms were forcibly merged into collective farms. He targeted kulaks, or wealthier peasants, as class enemies to be eliminated, and resistance was crushed. This led to a catastrophic famine from 1930-33 that killed millions. Those who criticized Stalin faced the Gulag prison camps or execution during the Great Purges. The October Revolution promised equality and socialism. It forged a powerful new state and a radically different society. But this transformation was built on authoritarian control. The dream of a workers' paradise devolved into a nightmare of censorship, repression, and suffering under Stalin's totalitarian rule. The bold experiment to remake the world came at an immense human cost. The Russian Revolution of 1917 did not remain confined to Russia. It inspired millions across the world, sparking the imagination of workers, peasants, and colonized peoples who dreamed of a new order. In Europe, new communist parties emerged, like the Communist Party of Great Britain. The Bolsheviks encouraged colonial peoples to rise against imperial powers. The Conference of the Peoples of the East in 1920 and the Comintern, or Communist International, united revolutionaries from across the globe. Non-Russians were even trained in Moscow at the Communist University of the Workers of the East. By the 1930s, the USSR had become the symbol of socialism worldwide. Its rapid industrial growth and promises of equality gave hope to many. But the reality was complex. A backward country had become a great power. Industries boomed, agriculture expanded, and the poor were fed. Yet, freedom was denied, dissent was silenced, and progress came at the cost of repression. By the late 20th century, the USSR's global image had declined. Still, the ideals of socialism, equality, justice, and dignity remained alive. Each country reimagined socialism in its own way, proving that the Russian Revolution had changed the world forever.